What makes a manly man? Well, that changes with time. So in order to understand about what it means to be manly in the first place, we must first talk about, historically, what has been a manly man. And that's what brings us to Coos Bay, Oregon, where it has the Festival of Sail. This is the first time they ever had it. They had several classic tall ships and a novelty attraction to bring in all the kids. What would that be? The world's largest rubber duck. However, it is important to note that although this rubber duck is 60 feet tall and 50 feet wide, it is not actually a rubber duck. It is just shaped like one. It's a blow-up thing. If you look right over my shoulder there, that yellow thing that looks like a turd, that's the air intake. It is a sheet, not an actual rubber duck. Very disappointing. The real reason why we're here enjoying this awesome view of the Oregon coast is for the guys now behind me, settled at the dock. Those are the tall ships. I don't know if we can get any actual footage of the inside of these ships, but anyway, sailing on one of these guys was considered a very manly profession because you are essentially on board a wooden prison in the middle of the ocean, even if you are a mercantile person. That means you're running freight, not enlisted in any sort of navy or pirating. It was extremely hard labor, and you were working 24/7, and with very little breaks, and with hopefully at least some grog or brandy to help keep you from going insane. Now, the ship behind me right now is the Lady Washington. This was the first American ship ever to set foot in the Pacific, or really to set sail in the Pacific. And this was remade about 50 years ago or so up in Washington State, and it is down to the centimeter as far as accuracy goes. Now, if this ship looks familiar, it played the role of the interceptor on the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And now that we have just had another Pirates of the Caribbean movie come out, Pirates of the Caribbean: The Search for More Money, we'll see what happens with the Lady Washington here, if it will play any future roles in any pirate films. Now, in order to be a man on board this ship, first off, there was only men on board this ship, and any mercantile ship at all. In fact, some people even considered it unlucky to have a woman aboard, even as a passenger. And that goes back to the settler ship that first came over to America and to the colonies. A lot of those ships hit horrible weather. A couple of them even sunk, losing all hands. And what were aboard those ships? Apart from other things, women. And historically, what I have noticed from my research is that manly professions were only professions where men could do it. So being a seaman, for example, was considered a very manly profession because women didn't sail. Also, being carpenters, being laborers, that kind of thing was a dominantly masculine profession. Women didn't do it. Of course, we didn't have women's rights back then, but sailing on these guys was manly simply because only men did it. Now, this is different than gentlemen. Aboard these ships, there were also men and there was gentlemen. Gentlemen were considered richer. They were of a higher nobility and class. And so they would be the officers, they would be the captains in the Royal Navy, as well as these would be people in London and in other big cities that would go along with fashionable trends. They were the ones carrying walking sticks, wearing tricords. These were considered gentlemen because they obeyed a higher social etiquette, higher quote-unquote, which is a bunch of social rules that only the elite people used. They were people who used specific language, who did specific actions that the common man did not do. And so there was a difference between what was manly and what was gentlemanly. And as we go into the 19th century, the 1800s, that's where you see the rise of the Victorian era, and when the common man was able to not be just a man, but be a gentleman as well. This is where the top hats came into fashion, the canes came into fashion, the mustache really came into fashion, and the strong man. For example, this classic photo of the fighting man, this is from the late 19th century, so the late 1800s. And this is something that would be considered very manly, having those muscles and participating in a sport, which was boxing, that women could not participate in. And this theme persisted into the 20th century, where whatever was manly was something that a woman would not or could not do. And then a very interesting thing happened in the 20th century. Women's rights came about in the Western world, in the United States and America, and this happened in the early 20th century, but then it happened again in the 1970s with the feminist movement in the 1970s, and this is what really destroyed the idea of manliness in our culture, where today it's really muddled and it's really confused. Women in the 1970s demanded to be eligible for jobs that were traditionally masculine roles. And this is a good thing, by the way. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm all in favor of equal opportunity. But nowadays, it is interesting because women have become mechanics, they have become welders, they have become seamen, they have become, or sailors, I should say. We can't use the term seamen anymore because there's also sea women, so sailors are around. We can't call firemen firemen because now there are women firemen, so they are firefighters. And that changes our very language on how we express about these positions, because these formerly manly jobs that only men did now also have women dominating and just rocking the Casbah as far as the jobs are going. So that leaves us with today. And what is manly? What is manly today? Well, things are muddled, because we can no longer define what is manly by the activities that only men do. Because now, with equal opportunities, women are doing those jobs as well, and sometimes even better than men. There are women in the military, there are women all over the place in doing these jobs that are historically been masculine and only male jobs. So this leaves us at a place where we can be gentlemanly, we can abide by a higher course of social interaction with each other, and we can also be manly. Now, this is why people, especially advertisers, are grasping at straws with what is manly. For example, today, men have started growing beards because that is something that only men could do. And so now men are becoming homemakers, they're becoming nurses, they're becoming people who have historically done feminine jobs in the Western world. And so we're at a crossroads in our history about what is manly. And I submit to you that now is a time for geeks who have been classified as not being manly because we do not do typical manly activities. This is a perfect time for us to come in and to change the definition of what is manly, what makes a real man, because the doors are wide open now. And I submit to you that being a geek and being manly can go hand in hand. And if you like this episode, feel free to subscribe. Great videos are coming out every week where I show you it is okay to be a man and a geek at the same time. You can also click on these two videos right here for some more manliness and geekiness, because after all, if the women don't find you manly, they should at least find you geeky. And until next time, don't go shaving on me.